It started with the sound of boots pounding on my porch, long before the sun had even broken the horizon. At first, I thought it was just the wind rattling the shutters. But then came the pounding fists on the door, followed by the words that would freeze my blood. HOA, security open up. Except our HOA didn't have security. Within seconds, men in black tactical vests stormed inside, guns drawn, shouting orders. My pregnant wife barely had time to scream before one of them slammed her against the wall, crushing her arm. That's when I reached for my Glock. For years, my wife and I had tried to carve out a quiet life in a gated community that promised peace. We had worked hard, saved every penny, and finally bought a modest home where we thought we'd be safe from the chaos of the outside world. My wife, 7 months pregnant, spent her days preparing the nursery, painting walls soft yellow, folding tiny clothes, and humming lullabies that made our house feel alive but beneath the surface. Things were never as perfect as the brochures promised. The HOA had grown increasingly hostile toward us, whispering about how people like us didn't belong in their neighborhood. The rules were enforced. Selectively, trash bins left out overnight earned us a fine, while our white neighbors got a polite reminder dot at first. We brushed it off as harmless pettiness. After all, we were used to slights, to cold stares, to the subtle weight of prejudice pressing against our shoulders. But this wasn't just passive aggression anymore. This was escalation. The HOA board had begun sending violation letters that accused us of damaging the neighborhood's aesthetic value. They even claimed my wife's pregnancy made our yard look unkept, as though the sight of us preparing for a child was offensive still. Nothing prepared me for the night when masked men calling themselves HOA police would kick down my door and put my wife and unborn child in mortal danger. That night started like any other. We'd just finished dinner, simple roasted chicken, vegetables, and tea to calm my wife's nerves. She was exhausted, her belly round and heavy, but her smile lit up the room. We went to bed early, not knowing that within hours our lives would be upended at 3 a.m. Before I could reach the door, it splintered open under a steel boot. 4 men stormed inside, dressed in black gear with the words HOA Enforcement Unit crudely stitched across their chests. Their masks concealed everything but their eyes cold, empty, merciless hands up. One barked, but before I could move, another grabbed my wife by the arm. She screamed, clutching her belly, begging them not to hurt her. Instead of letting go, he shoved her against the wall, pinning her so hard I could hear the bones in her arm snap. Her scream still echoes in my head. Time slowed. My chest tightened with fury. They weren't here to enforce rules. They were here to terrorize us. I could see it in their movements, the casual cruelty in their hands. The way they sneered when my wife cried out. They rifled through our living room, tossing papers, breaking lamps, searching for something they never explained. I shouted, demanding to know what authority they had. That's when one of them spat out, "Your kind doesn't belong here. We're cleaning up the neighborhood." That was the moment I realized this wasn't an official act. This was a hate-fueled invasion. They were using the HOA as a mask for something far uglier, far more dangerous. I looked at my wife, doubled over in pain, tears streaming down her face as she cradled her broken arm and unborn child. My vision blurred with rage. My heart pounded louder than their boots. And in that silence, one thought rose above the chaos. If I didn't act, I would lose everything. So I moved toward the nightstand drawer, where I kept a Glock 19 locked and loaded for emergencies. I had prayed I'd never have to use it, but some prayers go unanswered. The moment my fingers curled around the Glock, the world seemed to explode into sharp focus. My wife's sobs faded into the background. The intruder's shouts became distant echoes. All I could see was the trembling barrel of the gun as I raised it toward the monsters. Who dared to harm her? The first man turned just in time to see the flash. One shot rang out, and he dropped instantly, his weapon clattering across the floor. The others froze, stunned that their intimidation no longer worked. "Get him!" One shouted, but before they could rush me, I squeezed the trigger again. Another fell, clutching his chest. The third stumbled backward, tripping over the broken doorframe, blood seeping between his fingers. The last one hesitated, his eyes darting between me and the gun. For the first time, I saw fear in his face. He raised his hands, stammering, but I wasn't finished. My wife lay broken on the floor, and the child she carried was still at risk. I stepped forward, barrel steady, and warned him with my silence. He bolted for the door, leaving his fallen crew behind. When the smoke cleared, the house was chaos-splintered wood, shattered glass, blood on the carpet. My wife's breathing was ragged, but she was alive. I dropped the Glock, rushing to her side, cradling her as she whispered that she could still feel the baby kicking. Relief washed over me, but so did a cold realization. This wasn't over. The police arrived minutes later, guns drawn, expecting to find a criminal. Instead, they found me shaking, holding my wife's hand as paramedics tended to her broken arm. At first, the officers doubted my story-fake HOA cops, a hate-fueled break-in, but when they saw the uniforms, the patches, and the recording from our security camera, the truth became undeniable. The intruders weren't officers. They weren't security. They were neighbors' men who lived just down the street, emboldened by prejudice and protected by silence. For months they had plotted, fueled by hate, hiding behind the authority of an HOA that quietly condoned their racism. The aftermath was messy. Investigations spread through the community like wildfire. The HOA tried to distance itself, claiming ignorance, but evidence showed they had turned a blind eye. Those men were arrested, their faces splashed across the news. For once, justice felt real, though late, and paid for in blood and broken bones. My wife eventually healed, though the scars remained, both on her body and in her spirit. She carried our child to term, and when our daughter was born, her first cries filled the room with life that no amount of hate could silence. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear the pounding on the door. I still see the rage in those men's eyes. And I still feel the weight of the Glock in my hand, the moment I chose between surrender and survival. But I don't regret it, because in a world where people can disguise hate as authority, silence can be deadlier than bullets. And so, I'll leave you with this. When hate comes knocking at your door, what will you do? Open it or stand your ground?